I'm pretty sure it's been like a week, but it feels I thought I was last night. Rope train class. Whoa. But with
Hey, John. Can you hear me, John?
I can.
Okay. How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
Everybody's saying hello to you.
Hi, everyone.
Okay, everybody. John is here with us. Katie Ginn, I think, will be joining us soon. Surabhi will not be here. She will watch this later, hopefully, as Summer will. So we're going to play catch up today on a lot of things that we haven't finished. And I'm hoping also that I can answer any questions you may have. I think I may have created a lot of confusion with the syllabus, and if people have questions regarding the final project, you may ask me today, or please feel free to make appointments with me and come in and meet with me. So one thing about the syllabus is under the column that says assignment due, you are not turning anything in until you turn in your final projects. But you should have completed that part of your project on the day that it says assignment due so that you do not get too far behind. When we get back from Easter break, we are going to start translating your concepts for your pieces into actual lighting designs. And that's actually the most complicated part. And we will probably take 3 weeks to do that, just to answer your questions on how to pick which instruments, in which positions, in which color, with which focus to make up your piece. But if people are unclear about the organizational chart that we're using for theater students and the still to be made up organizational chart that we're using with the dance students, as well as the kind of research that you should be doing, please let me know. What else? I would also, for the dance students, if it's possible, I'd like to move up your lighting lab project, the second one, if I could make it a week earlier so that it's due on the 12th instead of the 19th. Would that be possible? Because I realize the dressing room is going to be way full on the 19th, and I can't really hold on to the light lab for that long. Now that the cast has gone from 9 to 16 overnight, they need more space. So does everybody think that's possible?
I'd rather do it on the 12th.
Rather do it on the 12th? Good, I like to hear that.
Well, I'm doing a show the next week, so I'm going to be stressed out.
Is everybody clear, all the dance students clear on what that project entails?
A light show.
A light show, exactly.
A light show with music.
A light show with music.
What? April? Yeah.
Yeah.
It used to be on the 19th.
Great, do it.
Okay, good. Thanks very much. Also, theater students, I now know when the hang and focus is going to be for Impure Thoughts. So after class, please come up and sign up for your hours for that show. What else?
It's 5 hours per pay and 5 proposers.
Yeah, it may end up, it's 10 hours total. Some people may end up doing more hours. And some may end up doing less and some more because this isn't divided into 5-hour segments. But we'll make it work. It's pretty much over the days that I told you. It is over the days I told you originally. So it's all on the 7th, 8th, 14th, and 15th. So hopefully you're all available sometime during that period. So today, as I said, we're going to finish up some things that we haven't finished up. First of all, we're going to finish talking about the dance symposium that I went to in October. So for the theater students, I went to a dance symposium in October in Las Vegas. It was all about lighting for dance. And I went over half of what I learned at that symposium with the dance students a couple of weeks ago, but you were excused from class. It was very focused on dance. But now we're all here and you're going to hear about the second half of that symposium. I hope that it'll be more of a discussion, less of a lecture. But just so you know, the format of that symposium was like TED Talks. So there were 20 speakers, so we spoke for 20 minutes. And because of that, a lot of the notes I have are just, some of it comes across just as a list. There's not a lot of detail in there. There was no discussion involved at their symposium. So I'm going to be listing a lot of things that they said, a lot of things that they recommended. Just so you know, the people who were there represented the lighting designers for Alvin Ailey, Merce Cunningham, Martha Graham Dance Company, San Francisco Ballet, Fall for Dance, which is a huge dance festival in New York, Urban Bush Women, I have a hard time saying that name, and a veritable who's who of people in the dance lighting world. And they all seem to know each other. They seem to be great buddies. In fact, I think there were only 2 people who were there who weren't speakers, me and one other guy. So they were having Old Home Week. Anyway, it was fascinating, and those kind of symposiums are few and far between. And so I was lucky enough to be able to attend. So we talked about design 2 weeks ago from that meeting, and now we're going to talk a lot, some about management and rep plots and other things. There were a number of stage managers there. As I said, I'm going to stop saying as I said 2 weeks ago. But one thing that you should know in the dance world, dance lighting designers are almost always lighting designers / stage managers / TDs / production managers, though production managers don't really exist until you get to the level of San Francisco Ballet. Small companies don't have production managers. But for those of you who are in the theater who are used to just doing the job of stage management, and if you start working for small dance companies, which I hope you will more than likely be doing all 3 of those jobs. They have a lot less money than theater companies. They're always on tour, so they have to pay travel costs, and it's expensive. And so they try to do it with as few people as possible. So it's good that you stage managers are learning about lighting, and lighting people learning about stage management. The kind of technical direction that I've been asked to do when I worked in a dance company is not what Beckett does by any stretch of the imagination. These shows are already built, even if they even have scenery, but they would expect you probably to deal with some sort of technical glitch if that came up. Most of the time these take place in dance venues that have their own staff. I sometimes call them the house manager, but basically the person who runs the facilities and guard the space. And generally, those are the people that know about the equipment. So don't be scared off by the TD part of it. Stage management and lighting design, yes, you need to learn how to do both of those jobs, as you know how they are.
Sometimes when you're a stage manager working in theater, you also have to operate all the boards yourself. So
That's
having
right.
the knowledge is good.
Yes, that's very true. So Relly's doing a show right now. I guess you call it theater? It's theater show. But you're at Live Oak Theater, correct? So did they have a house person there who answers your questions regarding the facility?
They're supposed to, it's written in our contract. They have a new TV though, and so he doesn't know their system as well as whoever did it in the past. They have no paperwork down on the space. And to talk about he was sick on our loaded day, so he was only there for an hour. So he wasn't very helpful. We had to kind of compile our own light plot by like turning on all of the faders and figuring out which light went to which channel. And they, I should get Daniel to send me a picture of it, but they have a hard patch bay. And so like old fashioned, like have to plug in the things for some of them. So we had to Danielle had to figure that out because it's not something we have to usually deal with anymore. So that was an interesting experience. So yes, they're supposed to have a house person.
So what Relly's just described is very typical of what you're going to run into in a lot of dance venues across the United States. Hopefully the person is nice. You often run into people. You run into people who really don't care about what you're doing. So there are personality issues as well as sometimes absentee issues like Relly's having.
I mean, it wasn't his fault for getting sick, but it just wasn't helpful for our end.
Right.
But it's also a really old facility. So they're working on upgrading it, but there are some things that just, it is what it is.
That's also true of lots of dance venues across the country, though. All right, so the first person who I wanted to report on was a woman named Pat Thomas, who people in the room kind of acted like she was the doyen of stage managers in the dance community. She had been the stage manager for Elliot Feld, who is in, and what?
My computer is a mess right now.
Well, my telephone's been doing that all day, so I completely understand. Anyway, she's a well-known stage manager, and she's currently the senior production manager at the LA Music Center, which in Los Angeles is made up of 3 huge theaters. It's a huge job. So here are some of her words of wisdom on how to stage manage dance performances. First of all, she said, stage managers need to learn the dance pieces by heart. You can't have your eyes in the score. Learn the pieces from video. SMs must know. Okay, this is something important, which I'm hoping we are going to start doing at St. Mary's, is if you are going to continue as stage managers, you need to know how to read music. And I'm hoping that we have a lab in how to read for dance and theater students, because you need it in dance and opera, and especially you need it in musicals. An opera, of course, you have to have it. So just to reference, most of these people work for big ballet companies. Some of them work for smaller contemporary dance companies like Urban Dance Women. So when they say learn dance pieces by heart, some of these people are referring to a stage manager who's able to watch weeks and weeks of rehearsal, as opposed to you get sent the paperwork and you show up to stage manage and you have one tech rehearsal and then the show opens the next night. A very typical schedule for a dance performance. She also said stopwatches are evil, and a lot of our choreographers here at St. Mary's think the same way. I happen to think that stopwatches have one benefit, which is if if what the dance you're doing is set to a piece of music, it's sometimes helpful to know approximately where you are in the time of the music in case you are calling a cue from somebody saying, you call the cue when the dancers do this, but the dancers do this 25 times during the piece. So if you know approximately where it is on the stopwatch, I find it to be very, very helpful. Because that's one of the hardest things I think for we theater stage managers is understanding the movement and just actually then picking it up when it happens on stage. So I do think stopwatches can have their place for in some cases. She also said that stage managers need to be able to focus the light plot when dance is on tour. So another good thing that you should all know. Brandon Baker, who is the lighting designer for Justin Peck and other stage managers, also said, and other choreographers said about the stage manager that half of the job is calling and the other half is documentation. It is really important in dance that everything is documented. I spoke with the dance students about this somewhat, but you not only need to have all your cue sheets, you need to have all your palette work done, your scroller palettes, every possible way that you can describe what's going on in the lighting design needs to be written up on paper. And a lot of associate lighting designers across the United States, their sole job is just to document dance. And one of the main reasons for that is that dance is done it's not in repertory, but dancers create a body of work. And that body of work is presented during their lifetimes and beyond. So a number of these people were lighting designers and stage managers for pieces that were created up to 70 years ago. So you need to have excellent, excellent paperwork. So we do not have a lot of time in this class to go into how you document a lighting production, but to the extent that you have control over it as stage managers and as lighting designers here at St. Mary's, you want to be sure your paperwork is complete and clean and neat and in a place that you could pass it on to somebody else. I think maybe the biggest difference between stage managing dance and stage managing theater, from my limited experience doing both, is the stage manager is one of the performers in how they call the show. You have to be feeling what is going on stage and the flow of the dance. As a stage manager, you are adding to the artistry. You're not calling your light cues by a word. You're not calling it by some beat of the music. You're calling about what's going on stage. And dance isn't necessarily the same every night. And you really need to be in it and involved with it if you're going to call the show really well. And I mean, the best way to do that, like Pat Thomas says, is to memorize the piece. But if you don't have time to do that, sing as many rehearsals as you can, watching video as much as you can, and also really getting a sense of the feeling of what the choreographer is after. There's a lot of, I guess you would say, heart in calling cues when you're stage managing a dance production. And that also exists to some extent in the theater, but not like in dance where that's basically the way it is all the time. Jim French, who is the lighting director at San Francisco Ballet, and for those of you who don't know, a lighting director is generally somebody who works for a company who is the interface between the dance company and the guest lighting designers who come in. They sometimes end up designing pieces, but they are also in charge of being sure that all of the work of guest designers is done properly. They interpret light plots that are sent to them. They are the ultimate middleman, and they have to have enormous technical skill as well as artistic skill. And they, along with associate lighting designers, are responsible for that great documentation that we need to have. I'm not going to go into detail about what he talked about, but basically his talk was about using MIDI time code for calling shows. And I am not that familiar with MIDI, but it is, it's not a computer program. It's a way that the computer, it's the way that your different pieces of electronics can talk to each other. And one of the reasons that he said that it can be valuable is to syncing lights and sound. It can sometimes protect design in a non-stage manager situation, or when changing crews for the same, or when changing crews for the same production. It can also save money. But the other thing that can do, and I think most importantly, is there's certain things that a computer can do faster than a human being. So MIDI, sometimes if you have a show that's got 50 light cues that take place on 0 count, sometimes having a MIDI that's where the music and the lights are queued up to each other can actually call it better than you can. A human just can't do it as well as a computer. So in those situations, it's valuable to use MIDI. John, can you explain MIDI when you come here in June? You know how to use it?
I know the basics of how to use it. I've not set up, I've worked on light boards where it's already been set up, but I've not set it up myself.
Okay, thanks.
Yep.
Anyway, hopefully we'll all learn about it more in years, but you can see where it does have that practical application. So that's a little bit about stage management and lighting directors, and I say we're jumping around. Another thing that happens when you're stage managing in dance is you often will be participating as part of an evening of your work and a number of other choreographers, or an entire dance festival. And this woman, Kate Bartschuh, who's the festival lighting designer for Fall for Dance in New York, spoke about how you work as a lighting designer for festivals. I won't go into it in a lot of detail, but it's one of those situations where you're getting light plots from 20 different dance companies, and then you as the lighting director are required to bring that all together and come up with one light plot. And let me just say that I think the important part of it is that you need to know what questions to ask those people. And if you're the stage manager or lighting designer for one of the companies participating in those festivals, you need to have good paperwork to show those people what exactly you need. We've talked somewhat about offline editing. Have we talked about offline editing at all here? So, okay. So offline editing is where you write your light cues on a computer without seeing the light cues. So you've designed your show, you have a list of all your light cues. In my case, I generally then take a sheet per cue and write down the intensity of each lighting instrument in the cue. And then if you're doing offline editing, you download software from ETC, the company that makes most of the light boards that we use, and you record the show. You go Q1 and you do channel 1 at, and you go through all your 200 channels, and then you have it on a flash drive. And the whole time you're just picturing it in your mind's eye. but you can get pretty close. And one of the things that's important is your cues are all written, and you generally know the timing of your cues. And so when you arrive, you just pop in the flash drive. You have to be sure that you're using compatible lighting equipment, extremely important. And it speeds up the process enormously. And I have to say that I've had to do offline editing for every dance concert I've ever worked on, just because of the amount of time I've had in the space. So in a nutshell, that's what offline editing is. You know, we have an Ion light board here, Lefevre, and ETC has the software offline editing for an Ion light board, and you just download it and go to town. And then you get there and you get to see it, and then you tweak it and your show's all ready. But a lot of places you don't have time to go in and program the board. In fact, you won't have time to go and program the board. So it's really a godsend to have those. And places like these festivals, I'm sure, well, like when we go to ACTF, we have to do the offline editing, and we send weeks in advance, we send the flash drive to the lighting director at ACTF, and they go through it to be sure that everything's working properly. So, yeah.
This is mildly related, but I lit a show this past weekend at Steakhouse Arts, and it was a very different experience than I've had before.
Uh-huh.
In part because it was the day of the show, and like an hour before the show, we're programming the light cues in. And then during the show, this was the part that I don't know, I'm wondering if this is a common experience, but during the show, I had all the programmed lights in it, and then, but I was asked to sort of improvise a little bit. So like, I was like dropping down, like during the show, like doing like, just like sinking in with the performers, they're doing toe, but like, and like lowering the lights and raising the lights and like doing these things, which it was actually pretty exciting to get to do that. And I don't know, like, I haven't seen that, or, you know, in my small, tiny little experience of St. Mary's lighting. Yeah. It was the first I'd ever been asked to like do that, and I was just curious about it.
So who was asking you to make the changes?
Well, it was Joe, it was the director. Was there with you? He was there with me.
It was a theater piece or a dance?
Oh, dance. It was dance and music. There was like lots of library music and Pluto dancers. But but yeah, that's what she wanted me to do too, the choreographer.
Like that was the intention from the beginning.
Well, she hadn't really told me it upfront exactly, but then like, but then they like asked me to, and yeah.
So I've never actually had to do that, but it makes sense to me that it could happen.
Especially with having tech on the same day.
Kind of a luxury that you are able to,
Honestly, because usually like in those kind of settings, it's like, well, that's what we have time for.
yeah.
So it's kind of a cool experience. So
It felt really cool. I like totally enjoyed it because it made it feel more in the moment, and it made me feel like I was like connecting energetically with performers more.
Yeah.
You know?
The only time I've done something similar is when we took Spring Awakening, the musical, to ACTF. We started load-in at 7, and the first performance was at 1 in the afternoon. And so the show used follow spots. So I asked the follow spot operators, when there was a dark spot on stage, I was talking, as the lighting designer, talking to the follow spot operators and asking them to use their follow spots to brighten up an area when somebody was in the dark.
Yeah.
But that was simply because we didn't have enough time to finish it. So we were just covering our butts. And fortunately, we had follow spots, which we could, use. We were doing a musical, so we were able to pull it off.
Yeah.
But,
I think it'd be really interesting as a collaboration with the lighting designer
yeah.
to be able to have to like knowingly going into it as like a open source works,
or, it's that choreology term that I mentioned last week, it's like academic way of looking at dance or whatever, but like, one of the ways is like, having unknowns within the strands.
Uh-huh.
To like, have this be like in a live experience or whatever. I think I'd be
Yeah.
super interested in.
I imagine there's some choreographers who do work that way. I mean, I honestly know nothing about Merce Cunningham, but I always heard that Merce Cunningham said, composer, go compose the music, I'll choreograph the piece. Robert Rauschenberg, you go design the set, and they didn't even talk to each other and didn't coordinate, and then they just
Wow.
brought it all together. Now, I don't know if that's true. I don't know if anybody here knows a lot about Merce Cunningham, but there can be that kind of very in the moment, spontaneous kind of design. So were you happy with the end result?
Yeah, it looks good. It felt good.
Great. Another thing that you will do as stage managers and lighting designers is touring internationally, and you will start doing that even in the smallest dance companies. A lot of times, our small local dance companies are booked to play around the world faster than they are here. Yeah, Dana's going to Thailand this summer. My only experience was going to El Salvador and lighting a piece. It was kind of like I don't know what you call it, like a Broadway musical dance review in this huge hall. And anyway, yes, it was definitely on the fly. But so anyway, Mark Mangold, who is the production manager of City Center, where Fall for Dance takes place, and was a stage manager for many years, talked about the necessity of when you're touring, you need to learn the culture and the traditions of the place you're traveling to. I'm sure you've heard about this. It applies to every field, not just to lighting and stage management, but it's extremely important. And he said, if you can't know how to speak all theater language in the local language, at least know what the numbers are. Know the numbers of the language in the place you're going to. You can get away with a lot with pointing and numbers. He said something interesting. I mean, these people go and they sometimes assign a translator, but translators don't have any stagecraft lingo. There's no way for them to translate the words that we use. They don't. Why would a translator know what a scrim is or a torm? Why would anybody even know that? So when you're doing this, he recommended that you collect and save as many words as you can in the language where you're going. It's also really important, and this is traveling in the United States as well as abroad, to know not only the technical setup, but the hierarchy of the personnel at the institution where you're going. I think for obvious reasons, if there are issues, you want to know who to talk to. It's probably good to know who the technical director's boss is. And it's just, the more you know about the institution, the better. It'll make your life that much easier when you're tour. I mean, I can talk a lot about touring, but I don't think you'll just have to experience it. And so, Jesse, what happens when people come into Shaw Anderson? What kind of experiences have you had with guest companies?
I'm always really stressed out. I usually tap them the same day as my performance. So usually they send me a video to watch because I'm doing the lights. They send me a video and I try to write a whole bunch of cues in advance that are sort of like the lights that I saw in your video. And then we do a cue to cue with those and make adjustments. Maybe we have time for a run before the show and then we do the show. I mean, it's everyone's had, but we've had 2 touring companies come through. they both seem fairly pleased, but it's a weird space, so most of my stress comes from the fact that like, I'm worried that I or someone else hasn't like fully explained that it's like a dance studio and it's small and there's like people dancing in all the other studios like almost the entire time they're going to be there and all that.
Yeah. Well, it also brings up for me, the hardest part of doing lighting design is when I'm working with a director or choreographer for the first time and trying to build a system of communication. So I would imagine that would be very, very stressful when you're trying to do a good job.
Yeah.
And you're an artist in your own right, which is immediately sending your stress level way up. And you're trying to do the vision of this person that you've never met before, and have never spoken to each other either. So that the relationship between you as a lighting designer, any kind of designer, and a director or choreographer is what your career is going to be based on. So you need to learn how to communicate really well. We're going to talk about a little bit more here. And I mean, if a director or a choreographer can say what they're thinking or what they visualize, and you understand it, and they will love that. And then a lot of directors and lighting designers work together for 50 years. My lighting teacher, she must be 75 now. She still lights the same director, who must be 85, who she met doing opera. But when you get that communication down and the designer can understand what the director is after, and the director can understand what the lighting designer means, it's golden. And I'm sure this applies in acting as well. I'm sure that Lauren talks about it in your class, your portfolio class, is that what she teaches? Lauren, English, what class does she? Yeah. I imagine she talks about your relationship with people, and that's what your career, that make for a good career. So Mark Mangold also said, it's good to know the hierarchy of the company, but it's also good to know about the company itself and what the goals of that company are. And you also need to be truly transparent about what you can bring to the table. Don't advertise something you can't deliver. And you need to be able to handle what you can. I mean, you're planning on your tour, so from your end. But you also need to make it clear to the sponsoring organization, this is how much you can do. If you can't give them the moon, don't promise them the moon. Susan Hamburger, who is the lighting designer for Urban Bush Women. And I might say, I did post that article by her a couple of weeks ago on Moodle. And when you have time, I think it's a really great article about lighting design. You don't have time this semester, read it when you get a chance. So I'm going to switch over to a little talking about communication between designers and choreographers, which we were headed in that direction anyway. She said what every dancer needs to know about lighting. They need to teach dancers on what it means to be a collaborator, how to collaborate, how to work with collaborators efficiently. This also applies for lighting designers as well, but I think dancers don't necessarily think they have to have these skills. As lighting designers, hopefully we know we have to have these skills. So that's why she's talking about dancers. How do we speak about something that we cannot touch? How do we find a common vocabulary? And I know I've talked about this, but I cannot stress it enough. When a certain person uses a certain word, that word means something to that person. And it may not necessarily mean to you what it means to that person. you need to ask. What does anger mean to you? I mean, what does yellow mean to you? The lighting designer from Merce Cunningham said, you have to risk feeling like a fool. But if people are using these words and you don't know what they mean about what they mean to that person, it's going to be hopeless. You need to learn how to communicate ideas to the lighting designer about movement. This is talking to dancers about lighting design. You need to be able to explain your ideas, the story of the piece, and she says, define the words you are using. Like choreographers, dancers, and you know the directors that we deal with here do this, constantly use both inspirational images and actual specific design images to get what they want. She said the word image about 17 times here, so that's good. So, and we're talking about this right now. That's what people are working on in their projects, but images can speak a million words, especially in lighting design. So use them to all their benefit because they will help you. There was a lot more conversation about documentation and everything you need to document, but some of it is pretty technical, so I'm not going to go into it, but document everything you know how to do. So, as I just mentioned. Then they talked about something, and this is totally from a philosophical standpoint, is they talked about rep plots. And rep plots are often referred to as house plots are, well, house plots are a little different. Rep plots are a plot that was designed by a designer for a specific dance company. Not for a specific dance piece, but for a specific dance company. A house plot, a lighting designer has designed for a specific venue. A lot of times that's the same thing, but I think that's the difference between a rep plot and a house plot. And then, I mean, what they really wanted to point out is that a rep plot is purely an economical tool. It's not an artistic choice. It's an artistic choice for the lighting designer. For instance, if somebody's coming to perform in Alvin Ailey's dance studio, they don't own their own dance theater, but they're going to have a rep plot that's set up by the lighting designer for the Alvin Ailey company. If another dance company comes in there, that rep plot is there because it allows you to do your work quickly. It isn't because it's an artistic choice. So, you know, in an ideal world, these companies talked about you wouldn't want a rep plot. You would want what you have in a Broadway house, which is a completely empty theater, and you get to rent all the equipment. I mean, you start from the ground up, and you start by renting the lighting positions and the lighting equipment and the cable so that you can create your exact vision as a designer. But if you do get into this situation, and you will, where you go, say, to Dance Mission, there's a house plot there that reflects the vision of whoever designed that light plot, whether it's Harry, the current technical director there, or somebody who designed it years ago. But it's an economical choice for you, not an artistic one. I think that's really all I had to say about the symposium. I'm just wondering if anybody else has words of wisdom. To me, it's really informative to hear what you said, KJ and Relly, talking about your experiences, and also you too, Jesse. I mean, that's, in this class, we don't get to really do a practical application of our design. It's all on paper. So hearing about people's experiences is enormously helpful, I think. So do you guys, choreographers, dancers, lighting designers for dance, have any other words of wisdom that our theater designers may not know?
I always think shadowing is really important. So, as a stage manager, a senior project, I actually went and shadowed a whole series of stage managers and production managers in the Bay Area, and they're all very willing to help out. And it's not even like them helping out. I would send an email, just ask if I could sit in the back behind them and just observe what they're doing. And I think I learned, it's a lot of people learn a lot that way by just seeing how things work and going to a lot of different houses and absorbing that way. And a lot of people don't mind if you're just a person in the corner. And I mean, I asked if I could have like 20 minutes after to talk to them, but that's not necessarily needed. But I found that really informative for me, because then you can see how other people work, especially in the professional field.
Yeah, a lot of people are flattered about that. I mean, if they think it's going to bug them, they'll just say no. But once they say yes, then go for it. I think that's very true. In lighting design, I don't know enough about costume and scenery design to know if this is true, but most lighting designers have started out by being assistant lighting designers. And in dance lighting, Jean Rosenthal's students passed it down to her students, who then became famous lighting designers, who then passed it down to their students. I mean, there's a direct line from Jean Rosenthal to Jennifer Tipton, as we talked about two weeks ago. So shadowing is fantastic, and then assisting. And so just so you know, in lighting design, there's an assistant lighting designer, and there's also assistant to the lighting designer, and there is an associate lighting designer. An assistant lighting designer will work only on paperwork. When you're an assistant to the designer, I think that has a lot to do with being like a personal assistant, like big time designers like Jesse, for the few of you who are involved with In the Heights, Jesse, before he left to go work. When he got hired to work on Hamilton, he was the assistant to the music director, which meant is he went and got him coffee, and be sure, you know. So anyway, in lighting design, the associate lighting designer may actually get involved with actually lighting process, and they're in charge of the documentation. The assistant designer is going to be doing just paperwork. And it's very traditional, a very traditional system in bigger companies. So I also then now want to finish up some things that I didn't get a chance to talk about during our discussion about color last week. But first of all, does anybody have any questions about what we did last week in color? I think I was telling Hannah this, you know, there are 2,000 colors, but when you go to lighting school, it's not part of your job to learn the 2,000 colors. I started out learning 20 colors, and then you just grow, because you pick a color and then you use it and you go, that's not the right color. And then you go start looking for the other ambers, and then you get to the point that when you're dealing with people who aren't experienced, they can't even tell the difference between the two colors that you're using. But that's how you learn the colors. You don't learn it in the classroom. And as I said, when we come back and start translating your concepts and your pieces into light plots, we'll talk a lot about color from that standpoint as well. What's the best color? So the thing that we didn't get a chance to talk about, we touched on this a little bit during our dance discussion 2 weeks ago, but are the cultural, psychological, historical, personal, and relational aspects of color. So I just wanted to bring those up quickly. Cultural meaning of color is fairly obvious. In different cultures, colors mean different things. For instance, in China, and this is very generalized, red corresponds with fire, symbolizes good fortune and joy. Red is found everywhere during Chinese New Year's and other holiday celebrations and family gatherings. Red is strictly forbidden at funerals and is traditionally symbolic color of happiness. Now, in Western culture, red symbolizes a lot of those things as well, but it also can symbolize blood, war, passion, lust. I don't think those in China that red would come across as those colors. So when you're lighting in different countries, you have to be very aware of the cultural differences. The psychological meaning of color. I'm going to take green for an example. So green is the color of fertility and growing. It's also the color of death and mold. So you have to be sure you use the color in the context. And one thing that's really important is, as you as a designer are picking a color to use, you have to work with what's right for you, but you also have to see it through the audience's eyes somewhat. You can't just say this color's, that white is going to symbolize death in a certain scene unless you contextualize it properly. So there is all that psychological meaning of color as well. Historical meaning of color. I discovered 10 years ago or 20 years ago, I used to think that all colors existed for all time. Well, all colors have existed in nature as nature has evolved over time, but color in terms of pigments have developed over time. The most obvious example I can give, and this is how I learned about it, is that the color mauve was invented during Victorian times and became Queen Victoria, one of Queen Victoria's favorite colors. If you happen to watch Victoria on television, you can see a lot of people in the court wearing mauve. It was very popular. It didn't exist before that because it had to be put together chemically. So the reason I bring that up is if you're doing something that you've set in a period or you want to have the connotation of a certain period, you need to be sure that that color existed in that period. And it's actually a bigger deal than you think. Like in Jesus Moonwalks the Mississippi, we had the scenes with Michael Jackson, and so then we had, we could use magenta and neon colors. But in the rest of the show, we only use colors that would have existed during that time period. It's actually a bigger deal than you think and can actually really throw something off, as if an audience member sees a Greek play and there's something that in a very traditional production but the lighting designer has used neon green to light it. It just doesn't work. So you do need to be aware of that, the historical meaning of color. Personal meaning of color. You need to determine what colors mean to you and at the same time take into consideration the connotations colors have for an audience. For instance, if you want to use blue to signify violence, you need to be sure that the action on stage is tied to that color and that you pick the right value and tone of that color to make your case. One example is if you look in that color guide from Roscoe that I posted on Moodle, you can find moonlight in the following, in that book, they have moonlight blue, moonlight green, and moonlight purple, but you also know that moonlight can be white and it can also be yellow. So there you go. And you have to make the case for it within the context that it's being used. So You can make your case for a color just like you can make a case for your concept for the way you're going to design a piece, but you have to be sure that it's backed up, and it contextually makes sense. Finally, and we talked a little bit about this last week, you need to be sure that every color you pick works in relation to every other color that you're using in your design. So we're not going to come back and talk more about colors. So I'm just wondering if anybody has any questions about how you might, you're all working on different projects and thinking about how you might go about picking colors.
How do you know the colors work together? Or
You mean a color next to a color, or when you're using two colors on top of each other? Okay. Well, with the additive color, like we went over a little bit last week, you can use the color wheel somewhat because the adjacent colors on the color wheel are going to be more compatible with that color. And the one opposite on the color wheel is not going to be that compatible with it. I mean, your best bet is to try it out in a light lab or any place you can get a lighting instrument. But I think you can possibly, you can use common sense, and a lot of it is just learning. Like I tried to give you the example last week of people standing in front of a blue sky, and that if you use a warm light on them, they will look yellow. I mean, they will look unnaturally yellow. And then if you make it a black background, then it will just look like a warm day. I only learned that because I made a huge mistake and put too warm gel in, lighting. So it really is a lot of trial and error. But for instance, when lighting costumes, you can use the color chart. Like red works really well with red gel, makes red costumes look great, but you're also going to know that blue is probably going to work really well on red because it's next to it on the color chart. And then moving in the other direction, orange is going to look well. And then when you get opposite and you get to turquoise, it's going to look awful on that color. And I have to say, I went to a dance concert last year that had beautiful costumes that were absolutely destroyed unintentionally by the lighting designer because the color palette just did not bring out the beauty in the costumes. And it was really unfortunate. And I think in that situation, the choreographer probably wanted the lighting designer to use this deep color palette, which obliterated the color of the costumes. They used the lighting designer and need to tell the choreographer, you see what that's doing to that? Because they may not see that. So yeah, I think it's just a lot of trial and error, and using the color wheel, common sense. And there are colors that don't look good on people. You've probably heard about that green is a really hard color to use on people. And when you start lighting a lot of pieces, you will start getting your own signature as a designer. You'll not only start, I certainly don't use 2,000 different colors. I don't know 2,000 colors. I maybe know 200 colors. And I try to expand my vocabulary by using colors I don't know. But I also rely on colors that I do know that have worked well for me in the past. This was going somewhere I was going. But also, I was also going to say for myself, I am a huge fan of the color green and use it all the time in my lighting design. But I do not use it to light people's faces, unless it's a play about Martians. There are a lot of things that probably you learned about from wearing makeup that you know colors that don't look good on skin tones. But yeah,
What about, I'm not sure if any of my lighting classes I've heard this talked about, and maybe it's because it's going out of style, like, 10 years ago, but what about when you're using a backdrop? With, I mean, in relationship to color, does it change? I mean, I suppose you're just doing the same thing of using your eye. Ballet is what uses backdrops, right? Hardly anyone else uses backdrops.
Right.
But I guess I've considered using backdrops. So,
Are you talking about painted backdrops or a white cyc with color on it?
oh, I meant using backdrops.
Yeah.
Like additional color. I don't know. Do you have any?
No, I think they can be great. As a lighting designer, you know, we were trying to light that piece of scenery last week, and it was hard as hell to do that.
Yeah.
So that's something, and I wasn't joking when I said this, you need to deal with this with the scenery designer during the design process. Because the director, I mean, everybody wants it to look a certain way, but if it's impossible for you to light something because of the nature of the colors and the drop, then you're just stuck. I know, I think they can be great. You know, I know that I've never seen this piece, but I've seen photos of, I think it's called Summerscape, the Merce Cunningham piece. It has an amazing painted backdrop. You're right, it's, I think, a lot more fashionable now, like Mark Morris has these big abstract paintings sometimes behind his pieces. But yeah, no, I think they can be great. And they can also, if they're painted properly, you can do amazing things with lighting to change the effect of them. You know, from rain to, you know, making it look like a terrifying space to a beautiful space.
Do you find that you can create, do you think that you can make it dynamic, having a backdrop? So that it has multiple looks, or changes throughout?
Having a what kind of look? I'm sorry.
Like, make it dynamic, so it looks like it changes throughout the.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. You know what? I will try to find some pieces online. I mean, I'm just thinking, have you ever seen the National Theater's production of Oklahoma? It has a painted backdrop that does amazingly different things. But I will try to find some examples to show you. I think it's the extremely skilled scenery and lighting designer who know what's going to work. I tell you honestly, I would have to do a lot of it with trial and error, which trial and error when you're doing a painted backdrop because they're so expensive. But,
I was considering making one for my final. Well, I'm actually more considering projection because I'm more into projection, but the idea of using backdrop has some amount of appeal to me as well. But I haven't paid attention enough to the lighting.
mm-hmm.
I mean, I haven't seen a piece of a backdrop in years, I went to the ballet last year, so I probably,
Yeah, but yeah, they still use them in classical ballet. But I know what you mean. There are some contemporary dances that you see with backdrops. I'll see what I can find.
When we do our final project, we're doing it in the theater, yes?
Right. Unless you want to be in another theater, but that means you have to figure out all
No.
about their
But I
instrumentation.
probably can't use a backdrop since I don't have a backdrop, so.
Sure you can. You can just tell me what it looks like and draw a quick thumbnail sketch. Everybody has the right to change the costumes and scenery in their pieces. In fact, I'm hoping that that Katie changes hers because she's doing Oklahoma and it's got the world's ugliest costumes. But,
Sorry.
yeah, no, I think I think if they're done well and there's a lot of, all the work put into it, I think as it, with dance, you're dealing with kind of the static quality of it there. It's the movement part of it that's, I think, harder. I mean, when you have black, obviously you've got this big, infinite, mysterious thing behind, so it's got tons of movement to it. But even when you have a cyc with a color on it, light has a lot of movement in it, the way that pigment doesn't necessarily have. So I think it can seem sort of stagnant,
Yeah,
but I don't think it has to.
yeah. That's why I like using projection, because then it's always like moving for it too, long. But
Yeah,
it's also too much.
yeah. I mean, I think a lot of people don't do it also because it's extremely expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any other questions about color?
I'm just like thinking because there's in that shot and the scenery colors and like a time when or like for instance when you choose your colors before you know what all the other colors are.
What, you mean what, the scenery and costumes?
Yeah, like is there a way
Only when the costume designer is behind in their work.
so like generally you always like are on the same.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. And a lot of costume designers are savvy about that and will immediately tell the lighting designer, you know, what they're working on. And I mean, sometimes I have the gall to say, I want this person to be wearing this color. But, you know, they can only say, screw you, you know. So, but yeah, it happens when things are late. And this is one of the things that we enjoy working in educational theater is that we have so much prep time. And we have weekly production meetings and all of that stuff that allows us to work on all that stuff, which just doesn't exist in a lot of places outside until you get to companies that have a lot of money. So yeah, here's the place to do it. And you know, you do need to, I shouldn't say you do need to. In most situations, you are complementing the scenery and the costumes. But you're also telling your own story with the lighting. It's not, that's hardly the main purpose of what you're doing. You're dealing with all of the different attributes of light to make the effect, the mood, the sculptural quality, all of the tools that you have as a lighting designer are a lot more important. We didn't get a lot of time to talk about using color for creating sculptural quality. I'm hoping maybe keep my fingers crossed when you see my designs for the dance concert that maybe we can hopefully see a little bit of there. From what I've seen, there are actually going to be some pieces with a lot of color and other pieces with no color at all. So, you can ask me why I made certain choices that I did. Yeah, and it's, as I keep saying, it's a lot of trial and error. Anybody else questions about color? As I said, that article by Susan Hamburger that's on Moodle is really interesting in terms of, she gives 5 examples of why she picked these 5 colors that she used in 5 different pieces. Some of them I wouldn't necessarily agree with, but she made a very bold choice that she makes a perfect case for. So it's a good, it's a good way. And you also, besides complementing scenery and costumes, to go back for that for a second, you also have the power and may want to do as a lighting designer to obliterate all that. You could be doing a piece that's got fairly realistic lighting and then all of a sudden want to go to a whole other world, which you can do by making everything bright red or bright blue and obliterate all the color on stage except for the deeply saturated color that you've chosen. So it's not only just complementing. So we never finished looking at photos. So the dance students did a light lab project with lighting. And I asked them to light the flowers in a way that made them look their best. I wasn't looking for a high concept, like how to turn this flower arrangement into a disco show. I wanted to make them as beautiful as possible. So we looked at most of a lot of these in the light lab, of course. Actually looking at them this way with lot of justice. So that was the before picture, and here is the after. No, those are different colors. So this is lighting that Summer did for this arrangement of flowers, and she's trying to make them look as beautiful as possible, and very wisely, she used a lot of different colors, but she used very low saturation gels. If she'd used too heavy saturation for one of the colors, she would have obliterated the look of them. So that's actually a combination of lavender, amber, and blue gel.
And it won't force shut down.
That's what it did to itself. I can't let something's loose. Due to the internet.
You can go to the shop and come back and
That's, yeah, so it was like, you know, I don't think you have to like unscrew the bottom.
No, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah. The only thing is that the other one has like salt. So it's like,
Yeah, that's what I
explode. Apple Genius. Yeah. These are really small. I was trying to see if there was a forced restart button, you know, like the ones that are like king size.
So Andrea, do you want to talk about your flowers?
So since I was out of town that week and I kind of misunderstood, I actually just picked a picture of how I would do it. So I picked that one because I just felt like it was very, it felt very like comfortable and like home-like. I liked how the base kind of went along with the living table and the kind of rusted wall. And from what I see is I see them just a side light coming from the right side, and then casting shadow over that. And then also, I mean, you'll see some front light used as well, because you'll see or it looks more three-dimensional without lighting in the background. And I also enjoy how it created the texture of the leaves and the flowers themselves with the highlights, mostly on the leaves and petals. And
Yeah, I mean, you could say I was just a picture of flowers with lights on it, but the lighting is, there's a lot of manipulation of the light here to bring out the sculptural quality of the flowers. And the use of the background, the light and dark background has a huge amount of interest. Clearly, it's not a picture of flowers being lit with just one light coming from the front. So, interesting. Here's Katie Ginn. This is the flowers unlit. And this is the flowers lit. So, mhm. So they're equally beautiful in their own way. You can see how much this blue or lavender light is brought out, brings out the center of the flower in a different way than just whatever light was here.
Mine's up there.
Is that yours?
Yeah, it says my name. You took the picture.
So yeah, the thing I love about this is particularly is the color background that you picked. It just brings out everything in front of it so well. And it's not something you would like immediately think, oh, well, I know with these flowers I'm going to put kind of a purpley blue medium density background. You know, you really, it's really a great example. Using the background light to bring out what's in the foreground. What other colors did you use here?
I was using a variety of pinks. Like, lighter ones, really.
We looked at the others.
Yeah.
So if you hit, I'm not telling you to break it, just like hit a little.
Just do blush.
Honestly, I don't really care.
I was like, I can't act
Like, sorry,
I'm
I'm
not
not
So I wanted to ask the dance students if you had any more thoughts about this organizational grid that I keep driving on about. Or should I just give it up and you guys just take notes in your notebook as you go along? Do you feel like it's of any value to try to organize the information when you're looking at a dance piece the way we look at it in the theater piece?
I think it is valuable. It's a little bit harder. I feel like it's sort of an individual thing,
Mhm.
and it's also individual to the piece itself. And I'm not sure that it's something that we could like collectively as a group come up with something that would work for like any dance piece
Right.
like that. But I think I like having it as sort of a basic. Like, how am I gonna think about this?
I think
So-
every dance is split up in some amount, and it's unique to the piece, like you said. But like, I mean, have you ever gone into like a rehearsals process, like in the middle of it, and the dancer's like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna go to the loop-de-doop section," and you're like, "The heck is that?" But that is something. It means something to them.
Mhm.
And I think I kind of, when I do my lighting design, I think about it in that manner, anyways.
Uh-huh.
And try to maintain the integrity of the piece through how it's created. I guess
Uh-huh.
if that makes
Yeah.
sense. That's probably because I have a dance background that I think of it that way. Like, oh yeah, that section makes sense to do it like that. And so trying to have the lights.
So I'd be interested in your projects that you use some sort of a grid, no matter what the rows are and what the columns are, whether it's going to be space, movement, sculpture, or mood, whatever categories you want. Because I'd just be interested in seeing what we can come up with. And I think you're right, Jesse. I think that there's may not be any one right list and stuff across the top. But I do think it's a valuable tool when you're working on a piece. I would think particularly like, what's the name of the piece that you're doing, KJ? The
Adoration.
Adorations. Because that has the different like sections of exercises in it.
Yeah.
And then it kind of goes somewhere else. That having that kind of table would be helpful in terms of almost like a reference.
I want to show you this one grid, because I still think that it could be, so this is the Nexial connections of the dance medium from choreology. And so we have, these are the 4 main strands, and then these are sub-strands that are, they're all listed, they're like costumes or what, there's all kinds of different sub-strands, and then these are the Nexial connections between them. This is like the from the choreological perspective, and like lights, for example, it would be interesting to see how lights could interplay, or if that's useful at all in terms of like figuring out.
Why don't you do it that way? See if that.
Like try it?
Yeah, I mean, it may be doing that and then somehow reconfiguring that. The one thing that may be hard with that is then figuring out like cues and the time part of it.
Right, exactly.
Right, so like, if you have a Dana piece, it's off of movement, and she plays a lot with movement. So you're probably gonna want to light on movement. Right, Rome is really interested in sounds. That's how we're trying to figure out how to break it down.
That's really
And
interesting.
then, like, if for, I'm thinking about Elizabeth's piece last spring, which really focused on the forward and performative and emotional quality of the piece.
Right, so you would base it off of that.
Do you guys know what we're talking about? This is the grid that Well, I was talking to Hannah and Kelsey about it today. The grid that you use, that you break down by scenes or beats or whatever, we're exploring the best way to do that in dance, where most of that stuff doesn't apply. So I think that's it. If I suspect that some of you will be working on your projects over the next 2 weeks. Obviously, we don't have class next week, so I will not be here tomorrow, but if you want to have a phone meeting, I will actually even be on campus some days next week if you want to meet. And I just want to let everybody know I am available to meet anytime. I'm on campus anywhere from 3 to 5 days a week, and I'm happy to meet with you for as long as you like.
Did the call end? Mm. Can you hear me? Oh, okay. I can't hear you.
You might have closed his laptop.
Oh, probably. Okay. Okay. So should we go?
I think so.
How are you?
I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good.
Good.
Going to India tomorrow.
Huh?
Going to India tomorrow
Oh, nice.
to get the music done for my thesis.
Ah.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, he just logged off. So I think I think class is over.
All right.
See ya.
See you then. Have a good spring break.
Yeah, safe travels.
Thanks. Bye-bye.